Breaking nuclear news. Let's dive right into the price action. The Sprott Uranium Miners ETF up 1.16% on the week. The broad stock market up 0.47% on the week. Uranium assets continue to outperform the rest of the market, proving to be a superior store of value in this economic malaise that we are in, which is truly devastating to all risk assets. But if you're looking for a place to store your capital, uranium is proving itself to be a solid store of value in this environment. Now let's dive through the underlying fundamentals, because price action is meaningless without good fundamentals. So John Quiggs put out a summary of the current uranium stock investment thesis. This is supply, current status of uranium industry. You can see it declining massively across the globe, across all areas: exploration, mining, milling, processing, reclamation withheld. So we have severely constrained supply. This is demand. World nuclear electric generating capacity absolutely skyrocketing, doubling in a few decades. And here is supply and demand. So green and red, you have spiking demand. Blue, you have uranium production. Obviously, a massive gap needs to be filled, and rising prices are the only thing that can incentivize increased production and bring about more profits for miners. But bringing idle the new large uranium mines into production will take far higher uranium prices than the $49 per pound today, especially as inflation raises the bar to $95 per pound for enough mine production to fix the deficit. Meanwhile, operating mines are in decline. And so you can see depletion of in-ground production inventory. Currently, we're in depletion phase 1. In the coming years, we're going to massively deplete the rest of the existing mine supply. So as a commodities investor, it doesn't get better than this. Now, compounding the bullishness of the basic supply-demand fundamentals currently of the uranium commodity, you have a massive wall of money streaming into the space from the biggest institutions in the entire world, just adding rocket fuel to the uranium supply demand crunch, which is incoming. Nuclear related investments beyond uranium look set to flood the market. Now, why is that? Well, we know the global elite is behind and backing uranium. We know they just labeled it as green, and so let's dive into the fundamentals there. The World Economic Forum, which most people would agree is pretty powerful and influential, just put this out. Small reactors could make nuclear energy big again. How do they work, and are they safe? Nuclear power is back in favor as economies seek to decarbonize and boost their energy independence. Small modular reactors are emerging as an option rather than having to build traditional large-scale nuclear plants. SMRs are simpler, safer, and cheaper than conventional reactors, and they produce less waste. So you have the World Economic Forum, the most elite, influential organization in the entire world, pumping nuclear technology. They want the price to rise, which is the bottom line, right? As investors, what is the bottom line of all this? Rising prices. So as investors, it is crucial to understand what the big money is doing. No one's bigger than the World Economic Forum, pumping small modular reactors. And because nuclear power is on the global agenda, is nuclear poised for an ESG-fueled comeback? The answer is yes. Once seen as an energy option on its last legs, the nuclear industry has had several victories lately. California Governor Newsom signed a bill intended to keep the Diablo Canyon plant running past its expected retirement date, and Germany plans to keep 2 aging nuclear plants available until at least April. We understand that nuclear potential is very, very great, and we're just at the tip of the iceberg, said John Kotek, the NEI's Senior Vice President of Policy Development. Investment is a key part of being able to meet that potential. Well, we know the wall of capital is coming. Around the world, lawmakers are telling investors that nuclear is not just avoiding being phased out, but that it will likely be around for some time. The Biden-Harris administration believes that our collective climate security and energy security will grow alongside innovation and expansion in civil nuclear power. Overall, nuclear power is far from perfect, but we believe it offers the best solution for network reliability from what is scalable at present and workable within the net zero by 2050 deadline. So bottom line is that assets that benefit from nuclear energy growth are priced at similar levels to when the fundamentals of this asset class were terrible. And they have not quite priced in this new development which is an incoming wall of money from the global elite. U.S. Department of Energy is making history with notice of intent. Plans for domestic HALU acquisition. Energy is aiming to prioritize domestic uranium using U.S. located physical capacity. Scope of work states must come from newly mined uranium. New demand 2.6 million pounds uranium per year. The U.S. government buying 2.6 million pounds of uranium per year. So at a time of severe supply constraint, we have massive buying pressure. Nuclear Central in Virginia's energy plan. The 2022 Virginia Energy Plan, announced by Glenn Youngkin, calls for a nuclear innovation hub to be established in a state and for a commercial small modular reactor to be deployed in South Virginia within the next decade. And so we're starting to see the big global agenda start to trickle around the world into various areas. France mulls a new uranium plant to cut West's reliance on Russia. So they're talking about building new plants, increasing the demand in the midst of a supply crunch. The European Parliament's response to the escalation of the Russian Federation. What have the deputies decided? Impose sanctions that will strategically weaken Russia. So in the midst of the supply crunch, in the midst of the nuclear renaissance, we have further bullish drivers. The European Union wants to impose sanctions that will strategically weaken Russia. Members of European Parliament also called for an immediate and complete embargo on Russian imports of fossil fuels and uranium, as well as a complete shutdown of both Nord Stream and gas pipelines to stop financing Putin's war with EU money. So the global geopolitics favor, obviously, scarcer and scarcer uranium supply as the entire Russian supply gets cut out of the market. And if you look at prior videos, you fully understand how significant that is. And so you're seeing these signposts all around the world. Parliament in Belgium, the Brussels Times, Parliament approves Dole 1 and 2 extension. Last week, we talked about how they were trying to shut down their nuclear plants. At this point, it's confusing how many 180-degree U-turns these countries are making. But the bottom line is no one is shutting down nuclear power plants. And these plant extensions, again, just adding fuel to the uranium supply crunch fire as they exponentially increase uranium demand. New parliamentary report, resisting Russia's energy war. UK nuclear investment for allied energy security recommends immediate funding to reinstate and expand UK uranium conversion, enrichment and fuel fabrication, deploy and export Rolls-Royce SMRs. So like the World Economic Forum said, small modular reactors are revolutionary technology that are going to change and disrupt the global energy supply. And so you have the UK falling in line. Renewed investment of around 200 million could reinstate conversion services capable of 4,000 tons of non-irradiated uranium within 2 to 3 years. Now, an aspect of the nuclear renaissance that most people are not quite realizing yet is that it is riding the trend of global tech innovation. And so we know technology grows exponentially. And in the nuclear power space, it is happening the exact same way. And when you're dealing with revolutionary energy sources, it gets very exciting very fast. This comes from Lobo Tigre. Like small modular reactors, try micro molten salt reactors, which can fit on a truck and power 1,000 homes when it's built. The molten salton micronuclear reactor, which will be built by Professor Matthew Memmott and his team, has a chamber that measures just 4 by 7 feet. Has no risk of meltdown and can produce enough energy to power 1,000 homes, the professor said. So what will humanity do with an endless supply of sustainable energy? That is the question. Technology is allowing it. We're just getting started. And so the only risk to the massive nuclear expansion that is taking place all around the world is some sort of nuclear safety event which would hurt investor psychology. We know how unlikely that is. We know how important it is as investors to play the odds. And we know the odds of anything like that happening are extremely small. If you do the math, how many nuclear reactors have been running around the world for how many days, for how many years without any sort of event? So what are the odds of a nuclear event happening? Next to none. And so again, there's always a risk with investments, but fortunately, the odds of anything bad happening are so small. We just saw in a war zone in Ukraine how there was a lot of fear-mongering about some sort of devastating nuclear event in a massive shooting war between two huge countries. Did not happen. Why? Because neither party is incentivized to make that happen. Vladimir Putin decrees Russian takeover of the nuclear power plant in Ukraine. A presidential decree signed in Moscow has designated the nuclear power plant in Ukraine federal property, but Ukrainian operators, Energo Atom, called the move worthless as the IAEA had visited Kiev. So you have the IAEA there, a third party monitoring, keeping us posted. This is from one of the IAEA members. On our way to Kiev for important meetings, the need for a nuclear safety and security protection zone around this power plant is now more urgent than ever. So everyone working to make that a reality, all while this nuclear power plant loses remaining power source due to shelling, UN says. So this is the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe. It has lost its last remaining external power source. All 6 reactors at the plant are shut down, but they still require electricity for cooling and other safety functions. So they're getting their electricity from diesel fuel, which there's plenty of in Russia. And so we're continuing to monitor the situation. As long as they can get plenty of diesel fuel to this plant, which is now in territory Russia has deemed its own, you can bet the Russians are going to do everything in their power to keep it running. And again, we're always going to cover the deep threats to this space just to be objective about how risky this investment is. So we've talked about safety. Let's talk about the deep threat, nuclear fusion. People say, well, nuclear fusion is a revolutionary technology that does not require uranium. And so we have to stay on top of that progress. Well, here is an article. No guarantee $20 billion fusion power plant will work. And just so you know the timing on when this fusion power plant is expected to be built, the UK AEA has said the plant should be operational by the early 2040s, with the government pledging more than $220 million for this program. Now, we're going to have to wait 20 years to see if this nuclear power plant even works. So the reality is it is not a near-term threat to the nuclear renaissance that is happening all around the world, which we know is being widely adopted and supported by the biggest institutions in the world. We will stay on top of this market. It doesn't get more exciting. Thank you for watching.